Hi, I'm Ahmed Shahabuddin. You are watching HuffPost Live. By now, you've hopefully heard Mitt Romney's leaked controversial remarks at a private fundraiser, including when he said Palestinians are, quote, committed to the destruction and elimination of Israel, and that the idea of pushing on the Israelis to make concessions of any kind to the Palestinians is, quote, the worst idea in the world. Now, aside from being destructive to the conflict and untrue, they do, however, reveal a truth widely held by many politicians on both sides of the aisle in Washington, that managing the Palestinian-Israeli conflict without the will or desire to change the status quo to end occupation is the preferred policy and approach by Democrats and Republicans alike. Sure, Obama's pushed back a bit on Netanyahu's willingness to attack Iran and called the Israelis' illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank as illegitimate. But when it comes to policy and action, many say Obama is no different to Romney, or Bush for that matter. So why then is Netanyahu actively working to defeat President Obama? Or so it seems. Joining me to discuss this is Aaron David Miller, a scholar at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and has advised 6 secretaries of state on Arab-Israeli negotiations. We also have Daniel Levy. He is the Middle East director at the European Council on Foreign Relations in London and former special advisor to Israel Prime Minister Ehud Barak. And Rashid Khalidi, who is a historian and the Edward Said Professor of Modern Arab Studies at Columbia University. Is Prime Minister Netanyahu trying to oust Obama or Ahmadinejad? What do you make of this characterization, this narrative, here in the U.S., but also now in Israel?
Israelis and Americans have been intervening in one another's politics for 30 or 40 years. I mean, there's no question of that, about that. But I think if the Prime Minister is seriously trying to turn or transform the election, and it's clear he would prefer Mitt Romney as president, it's clearly a ham-handed effort, and it's not going to succeed. As for Ahmadinejad, I think there's a much more compelling case that the Prime Minister would like to, if he could, find a way to clearly change the malacracy in Tehran. That's not going to happen either. So I suspect that the Prime Minister's intercessions, really flowed more from frustration and his own conception of the challenges he faces, rather than any serious effort to think that he can re-elect or elect Romney over Obama.
I would suggest that the relationship between Prime Minister Begin and President Carter was not a very good one, and I would suggest that the relationship between Prime Minister Shamir and President Bush Sr. and Secretary of State Baker was almost as bad as the relationship between this Prime Minister and this President. I think that's neither here nor there. I think that what we're seeing yet again is a contradiction between the desire of American presidents and American national interest and the difficulty they have in doing this. And one after another, American presidents, I think with the exception of George W. Bush, have had aspirations and desires to do things which they felt were frustrated by the stubbornness and the intransigence of one Israeli prime minister after another. I would agree these frustrations seem to have reached a very high point with this pair, but then Israel does seem to be trying to drag the United States into something which would be very much against its vital national interests in a way which, to be very frank, I can't remember any Israeli government trying to do on quite this level.
All those delegates in favor say aye. All those delegates opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 have voted in the affirmative.
So you're both smiling. I saw Rashid laughing maybe. Daniel, you're laughing. The truth is, what happened was laughable. What's your take on this, Daniel?
I think this is part of where Prime Minister Netanyahu's push is coming from. He understands, I think, at some level, that the idea that Israel, 40+ years, approaching the 50th birthday of occupation, especially in a region that begins to democratize, can continue to disenfranchise Palestinians, can, in its own internal workings, look increasingly unlike a democracy. I think he understands that making that cause a bipartisan cause with deep roots of shared values on both sides of the American political divide is, over time, going to be an increasingly difficult stretch. And I think that is why, amongst other things, he has a clear preference on the Republican side.
This entire conversation is being dominated by a point of view which, in my judgment, is at a minimum historically inaccurate. Now, let me make a few points.
Can you just explain to us what that is?
Rashid is absolutely correct that when the U.S. allows its special relationship with Israel to become exclusive, which in large part it has done over the past 16 years, 8 under a Democratic administration with Bill Clinton, for whom I worked, and 8 under George W. Bush, for whom I worked for a brief period of time, it cannot function at all as a credible or effective broker.
Where's the media on this? Okay, we're on Huffington Post Live. A lot of people are watching this. A lot of young people are watching this. In 5 years, in 10 years, there's an enormous change coming.